we're even look. It's just really cool because you'll literally analyze, like the biggest brands of the world, and what their business model is, and of course, I'm sure you're ranking for a lot of this stuff. So it seems like you get a lot of attention for this because I think people are genuinely curious as well. It's like, how does Lyft make money, or Uber, or Apple? We might know, but then you dig in with all these crazy models, and you're like, oh, okay. It seems like a really good learning experience that you're putting out there.
This is an intro. Intro.
Hustle and Flow Chart with your boy, my boy, Matt Wolf and Joe Fier.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi there.
Welcome back.
Hey, I'm back. Been
You're
here
back
the whole time, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, this one. So ever since you, the listener, ever since we hung up with our guest today, which we'll present him in a second here, we've been nerding out on his website, going deep on this thing.
Oh my gosh, his website is like my new favorite website.
Yeah, and you'll hear us nerd out also on the podcast about it, and you're probably going to be like, what the hell are they so cool about this website?
Yeah.
It's because this is like deep research that this guy does on every big brand in the world, basically. Yep. So you can actually understand what's happening, so you can find cool things to use in your own business, and just curiosity in general too. Yeah, it's so cool.
So today's guest is Gennaro from 4 Week MBA. That's actually spelled Four, so it's not the number 4, but 4 spelled out. So 4weekmba.com. And basically what he does on this website is he looks at businesses and he reverse engineers them. He looks at the financial statements. He digs into how they're getting their traffic using various SEO tools and various analytics tools. And he just really does a very, very, very deep dive into these businesses, and then writes up these exhaustive blog posts about their entire business model, where their revenues are coming from, where their traffic's coming from, where he sees it going, where everything about these businesses is sort of laid out in these mega blog posts.
Yeah. And the cool thing is that it's not biased. So he's very objective with all of his findings. He does an immense amount of research. He just consumes content like crazy. And we all consume content. Like Matt, you've been going down the rabbit hole a lot, even more so on researching very specific things like trends and customer behavior and objections for products that we promote as affiliates and things like that. That's essentially what 4 Week MBA has just available to you around business models, literally, and it's actually linked in the show notes. So when you check that out at evergreenprofits.com, check out the business models. There's a link there to 4 Week MBA, and it's like this ongoing business model list. And it's really cool. There's everything in freemium models, affiliate marketing's in there, all the subscription based stuff. And there's I don't know how many, but he's I just keep putting business models on there.
Yeah. And
just imagine how many new concepts or connections you could combine what you're doing now, or maybe you've been hitting a brick wall with your model, but you read something on there, you're like, holy crap, didn't even think about that. And, maybe your customers have been asking about it, but you don't know how to build the model. Well, it's right there.
Yeah. I mean, we recently did a therapy session all about the sort of affiliate marketing business model and how that's kind of the path we're going down. And just us digging around on 4 Week MBA, we start to learn holy crap, there's a lot more affiliate businesses than you realize. And some of the businesses you don't even realize are affiliate marketing companies are multi-billion-dollar companies that earn all of their revenue through affiliate marketing. We're holy shit, this is huge.
Well, let's talk about actually what the one that we nerded out on was Booking.com. We had no clue that Booking.com also owns Kayak, owns rentalcars.com. Open Table, basically a lot of travel and entertainment type
booking sites.
Yeah. And they're not all like this, but not all of their revenue comes from this, but essentially they're affiliate marketing businesses, but they have some services, upsells, partnerships. But the whole thing is, we're holy crap, here is a big business, and this is just from Matt and I's perspective because, we're really into content and then essentially, pairing someone up with something that's beneficial for us, mainly marketing tools. But we could see in this whole, wow, I had no And then he just breaks down, just like, okay, here's where their advertising's coming from. Here's where their revenue's coming from. Obviously, these are public companies, so he can get very granular on this stuff.
We learned that like Booking.com spends about $4 billion per year on direct response advertising and only about $400 million a year on actual brand advertising with television and radio and places like that.
Yeah,
I would have thought it would have been the opposite, actually.
Right. And it's things like that. You're like, oh, cool. And obviously, these are big numbers, big businesses, but hey, there's a lot to learn from these guys because they're obviously spending a lot of money on it, so it's probably working fairly well.
Well, we're talking a lot about his website and how he does an amazing job at reverse engineering all these businesses. But what we actually talk about on this episode with him is how you could actually do this analysis yourself. We kind of dive deep with him on how he goes about doing the analysis, like where he gets the data from, where he gets the information, how he organizes the information, his sort of methodology behind publishing the information. And so if you wanted to do similar things yourself and reverse engineer businesses so that you can, maybe find gaps in your own business that you can implement by doing this data mining on other businesses, you can. So that's really the main topic of this show is how to reverse engineer other business models. But saying that, he does a freaking good job of it, so definitely subscribe to his blog as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much free content. He has some courses in there as well. Yeah, it's how to analyze business models. You could see a lot of his inspiration. He gives the formula in this podcast, but also like the why. Like, why do you want to do that? It's not sure. You might be curious, like, oh, what's this blogger doing? But it's really cool because, like, no, like you want to analyze someone for a purpose of your own business. So it's like, oh, what kind of marketing strategies seem to be working for this blog, for instance? Yeah. And then like there are key things that he actually identifies first before going to like marketing or content type or whatever. Like there's other things that kind of come before that. Yeah. So he'll line all that out. Also, there's a big thing because we've been talking to a lot of folks about this stuff is just the consumption of content and how you organize your content and your thoughts. And so we get into learning.
We touch on it a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and just the concept of the learning and the teaching and the writing and the, how it really solidifies your understanding around topics. So we dig into his philosophies on that.
Yeah, learning versus internalizing sort of thing. So we dive into that. And we took notes on this one too.
Oh, of course we did.
Yeah, you can get them by texting the word comp to 38470.
Yes, get that phone out and text away.
38470.
Text comp.
You screwed it up. That's not how the jingle goes.
Maybe it does this time. We're making a new one.
38470.
Text comp.
See, you're screwing up.
Oh, man. Okay, don't write text. Just text the word comp.
38470 comp. 38470 comp. See, if you add text comp, then you can't keep it in a 4/4 timing signature, and it makes it more difficult.
You're such a music nerd. All right, so you can text that, get the notes for free, or you can go to hustleandflowchart.com/comp, COMP, and get them when this episode goes live. They are free for 2 weeks for this episode.
Yes. And all episodes that come out.
Yes. So got a 2 week window. You'll get something for free. Yeah. Check it out. We, of course, have all these notes. We always send them out monthly in a physical form in a newsletter, EGP letter, and we have a whole membership site. Yeah, it's cheap. It's really cheap.
It's $15 a month.
Yes. We pretty much give you everything in massive time savings. You're always going to be in the know of all the cool stuff. So sign up.
Yes.
It's worth it.
Do that. Let's go talk to Gennaro.
Make it worth it for you. On to learn about business trends and things. Hey, Gennaro, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thank you. Very happy to be here and all good. I'm actually connecting from Italy, so I'm a bit late, but I'll try to be awake for the whole episode.
You were saying you're up till at least 2 every night.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, it's still the middle of the day for you.
We're just warming your brain up for you. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so Matt and I have been nerding out on your website for our MBA.
4 week
weeks,
MBA.
sorry, Jesus. 4 week MBA. And oh my God, like, I don't know how you do it. And you also have another high level position that you have at a company as well. So I think this is going to be fascinating to see how you're producing all this content, but also the theme behind it is absolutely fascinating. The way you come about things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the big thing, like we'll be covering a lot of business models, for folks on the show. I think that'll be really cool because you have this interesting and, you just have this like perspective that you're bringing to the world through 4-week MBA, and you give away all this so much for free. I mean, this content is like literally a masterclass of business models and how to apply it for yourself. So I think, let's kick it off with I know your background's interesting. Let's get into that a little briefly to start things out, and then we'll dig into how 4-week MBA came to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I probably start when I was 15, but then the story would be too long. So let's cut it short. But just to give you a very short story, I always had this thing that I wanted to be financially free, and for me, the being an entrepreneur meant actually being able to actually become free in a way. But the funny thing is that the more I was looking for answers, like the more I was trying to understand how do I become like an entrepreneur, how do I become financially free, and the more I started to look into the academic world, because my parents are both like a doctor and a professor, so for me it was like a normal journey just to look into academia, university, and these sort of things. So I went at the university because it's a normal journey here in Italy. So I went to the university and then got an MBA. And as I was going forward and gaining more knowledge, though, I founded myself actually drifting away from becoming an entrepreneur. And when I realized that, actually that's where the 4-week MBA came to be. So I wanted to actually build a sort of business school that would be quite actionable. So even though you still learn a lot of high-level stuff understand the business world, especially the digital business world, still those are things that you can really act upon. So I was trying to really do something on with a bit of individualistic logic, because I wasn't like, I'm going to build, I'm going to help a million people get the business education. I was more like, how do I build the kind of business school which I wish I had when I was doing it, because I was learning a lot of things, but at the same time there was very few about new digital business models and the new tech companies. I mean, I'm sure now many MBA programs cover a lot of this stuff, but back then in 2012 there was very little to that. And actually, I was going through like my emphasis was in corporate finance. And this is probably the farthest thing, it was at least back then, the farthest thing from digital marketing and stuff. Today it's closer because, when you look at also at stocks and stuff, the tech companies are the hottest companies out there. But, back in 2010, 11, it was more, I was more focused on the really financial side. Indeed, for me, when I was talking to the sales guy at the company, like the sales guy on the other side, for me was just a BS vendor. So it took me a bit of time to just understand that actually I needed to master also the marketing and sales side of business if I wanted to actually get through the journey of becoming an entrepreneur. And that's where 4-week MBA came to be. So it was really documenting all the things that I was going through as a head of business development for a high-tech startup, and as my previous life and career in finance and control of a real estate investing company. So I was just putting together the different domains and leveraging on that to actually build a framework to understand the strategy behind business models, companies, and stuff. So long story short,
that's perfect. Yeah, I mean, I've gone through. Matt and I both went through business school. I graduated in marketing and Matt finance. But it's interesting. We always talk about the things that we learn in school. Like it's a memorization type practice for most of schooling. But like now, there's so much information online. You can look up a lot of that stuff, but there's not a lot of stuff that that we're using from our time
a lot of
in
it
school.
goes outdated too. Like you were saying, there's a lot of stuff that business and digital marketing moves so fast that the stuff that we learned when we were in school almost 20 years ago now, like most of it isn't even that relevant anymore.
Right.
Absolutely. Actually, you have to forget it because otherwise the risk is that you're going to make damages to your own business. So there is also a lot of unlearning process going on. So for me, I had probably a couple of years where I needed to forget a few things and then going back to learning the new stuff. So.
So it sounds like it started, was it more of a curiosity thing? It's something like a need that you wanted to drive in yourself, but then to also present it to the world.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most fascinating stuff is that when I was back until like 2014, I didn't even have idea. I mean, as my generation, someone from my generation, I was aware of the whole digital world, but I wasn't an active producer. But when I actually figured that I could put stuff out on the web, and I was very late on blogging, so as you can imagine, there's nothing new to that. But in 2014, when I figured I can put this stuff out and get feedback and understanding whether this is valuable also from a practical standpoint, I was like, wow, this is something that I need to take advantage of. Yeah. And I think it took me like 1 or 2 months to understand that I didn't want to go forward with my career. It was not a simple decision because I was in the US. I was in San Diego, and I had an H-1B visa, which is for people who work in the US. They know that it's something very, very valuable because it enables you to actually gain a green card, which then you can live permanently in the US. But basically, what I did, I resigned, very, very quickly, and then I said, okay, now I need to understand how do I build my own digital businesses so that I can finally go toward this journey of being an entrepreneur and drifting away a bit from the academic world. And at the time, actually, I was thinking also to go back at university for a PhD and stuff. So I was falling into the old mistake of going to academia to actually, going through entrepreneurship, which thank God I didn't.
Yeah, yeah. It's true. I mean, and it seems like you're still, you just have an immense amount of content, and it seems like you have a really good system down. So, like, even though you're later to blogging, it doesn't really matter. It's just really cool because you'll literally analyze, like the biggest brands of the world, what their business model is, and of course, I'm sure you're ranking for a lot of this stuff. So it seems like you get a lot of attention for this because I think people are genuinely curious as well. It's like, how does Lyft make money, or Uber, or Apple? We might know, Absolutely. But then you dig in with all these crazy models and you're like, oh, okay. It seems like a really good learning experience that you're putting out there.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was it made sense to start from tech giants because if you're building a business today, I mean, if you think about Google, Facebook, and Amazon, those are actually are the gatekeepers of the distribution. So if you're a small business, most probably you're actually going through those gatekeepers to actually earn your customers. So you better understand how they work, what logics are behind those companies. And that's the whole point. So I'm not saying, if I analyze a Google business model, I'm not telling you your company or your small business is going to be like Google. It's never going to be like that. I mean, a company which has a scale, there's completely different properties than a small business. But the whole point is that if you understand what's the logic behind what Google is doing right now, you can probably gain a piece of the cake in your small market, which means that you can really ride the wave of a large tech giant and then gain customers as a result of these logic. So that's why I do it. And I hope the message it's clear. Of course, then people are also curious about just understanding how those models work. And some people also think that, I can do what Google is doing. I mean, Google can do that because at this stage, Google is not a startup anymore. There are still many things that we can learn. For instance, the way they experiment and the way they do things, it's very valuable to observe. But at the same time, it's very important to understand that those are huge companies that have really are different creatures than a small business. But again, as a small business, you can take advantage of them and just surf their waves. So that's for me, it's the most important takeaway from the blog.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess, as podcasters here, I guess, Apple would really be our gatekeeper, right? As far as how do we get distribution of this content out into the world. Podcasts, for the most part, there's obviously other platforms that are growing, but Apple's sort of the gatekeeper to what podcasts get out into the world. And I guess understanding the behind the scenes of how these businesses work and how these things are sort of, keeping those gates up, you can probably a little bit easier get beyond those gates.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the whole point.
Yeah. No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, just business models in general. I know you have a whole page here. I mean, there's we're a big affiliate marketer, so I was curious. I'm like, oh, there's affiliate marketing model. And you explain all of that. And, there's the freemium model. There's the subscription models. I think it's really cool. So how would, it just seems like, there's a lot you're putting out there. When let's say someone goes to your site, for instance, because there's just a lot of content, and the point here is, you're doing a lot of this reverse engineering, so other people probably don't need to, but for them to actually understand and identify, where have you seen the value that most people can get from analyzing these models and all that? Is there a way for people to focus, or things that you've seen work best from people consuming your content?
Yeah, absolutely. The approach that I have with my content, I try to really look into original research. So I try to really look because just to give you a bit of context, when I realized there was an opportunity in the space with the 4-week MBA, I was looking at other very big players. If you look in the business world, there is websites like Investopedia, which have millions and millions of page views. But the whole thing, I realized that also when you went to Investopedia, and you looked at an article, most of the time they didn't do the research. It was not original. They were citing other sources, and then those sources were bringing you to other sources. So it was always this is not the real source of this information. So the whole point of 4-week MBA is to really provide the original source for the content that the research provides. And for many people, there are different kinds of value that they get from values that they get from the content. For some, it's there are some people which are starting up a new company, a new business, and they are just trying to understand, okay, what model do I use right now? And of course, by looking at the different models that I have on the blog, they get inspiration to actually start experimenting with some of those models. For some others, it's a change in career. So, for instance, they are coming from let's say a development background, or for instance, they are more in the product development team, and they want to go in a more managerial role, and so they try to understand these higher level concepts so that they can also improve their career. And then of course on the other side, there are also more analysts or venture capitalists, or whoever is looking for how the business tech world is evolving right now. They try to really make sense of it, and one way is through the content of the blog. So those are the most important values that people get from the content, based on the experience and feedbacks that I get. And of course, for me, the best metric is when I get messages of people which say, this is how the content has helped me. And again, it's a lot of research, because for me, the way I approach blogging is not about writing how-tos, even though some of the main contents are sort of how-tos, but in reality, those are really research. The way I look at it, it's I'm doing a research in the real world. I don't have any constraint, because I don't have to follow the academia rules, which, for the academia, if there is not a model which has been proved throughout the years, there is no sense in covering it. For me, I don't have those constraints. I mean, I can cover it right away and show it to the world, and then it's going to be, the world which, the business world, which will decide whether this model makes sense or not. So by not having those constraints, I can actually offer valuable research, and at the same time being the primary source for that. So I don't have to be an intermediary of information. I can be the source of that information. And another key element is the freemium content model, where of course most like 99% of the resources you get on the blog are pretty much free. I mean, there is no charge, so you can get most of the value that you need pretty much by reading the resources which are available on the blog, which again, it's big enhancement on the brand. So I think it's very important also to have that kind of logic. I mean, I think a few episodes back, you also had Neil Patel, which is is a great marketer. And I mean, he's also in the marketing world. He's also following the very aggressive freemium model, especially with the new tool like with the Uber Suggest, which I think it's a very interesting tool that I think sooner or later is going to charge for that. But right now, of course, it's working as an amplifier of the brand because it's people just go on the site because of the tool. So I think it works as a strategy. So it works to think of a free sort of freemium strategy to enhance the brand. But you need to think of it as a growth tool rather than a revenue generation strategy. Because what happens is that in many cases, business people think of a freemium as a revenue generation, but I think it's just a way to amplify the brand. So in some cases, it can also work as a revenue generation strategy if you're able to build a funnel out of this freemium model so that you can qualify the leads across the funnel. One example, for instance, it might be a company like Slack. But also, if you have a freemium model like Slack does, then what happens is that you try to hire salespeople to actually find good leads across these very large funnel that you have, and you end up just spending more. So it's also important to understand that the freemium sometimes just a growth tool. It's a different strategy than making money. So if you acknowledge that, then you leave it up. I don't know how to say it, but if you do understand that you can use premium as a branding strategy rather than just looking at the revenue generation that it can bring, actually you can create even more opportunities.
Yeah. No, you nailed it on the head. I think you get everything, like for instance, us, like we'll try to put everything for free out there as much as possible, and it's a great amplifier. And I love that you mentioned these tools like Uber Suggest being, a big amplifier of his brand, Neil's brand, but it's also a lead generator. And yeah, I think he is going to charge. I believe he said that on the podcast when he was on too with us, but maybe not.
I don't remember.
But either way, like and we're actually finding we've been deep diving into a lot of different ways to use assessments, tools, or personalization type mechanisms to increase engagement. And that's it's going to help with marketing and it can help in all sorts of things to solve problems for the folks paying attention to your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Now on your blog, do you ever inject your own opinions, or are you just kind of presenting the facts? These are all the facts, you interpret them how you want, or do you ever look at business models and go, I don't believe this is going to be a good business model and here's why?
There is a tricky, balance that I have to keep, because as you can imagine, like most of the traffic is coming from search engines, and as you know, if you try to express too much of an opinion, then of course the risk is that you might not be able to have the same kind of rankings, because. So let me rephrase that. What happens is that. The way I do it, it's I always express my opinion on some of the pieces. So there are two sorts of content pieces that I have on the blog. There are like pieces which are very fact based, so based on data and the numbers and stuff, where there is very little opinion. For instance, if I cover a business model like Uber business model or Google business model, of course, there is a bit of opinion inside, but then I try to present the data. And then, of course, there is always some opinion, because also the way you read the data, of course, depends by how you look at things. But then on the other side, what I try to do is also sometimes to start from a topic that I know has a lot of interest through from the organic standpoint, and then I try to express my opinion as much as possible, because for instance, I wrote recently a piece on brand building, which I expressed I think most of my opinions on the topic, and as you will see, it's probably on the second or third page of Google. At least it was since a few days ago now. There was a recent update, so I'm not sure about that. But the point is, I try to keep a balance on the one end because, of course, the key channel that drives traffic to the blog is the organic channel. But then on the other side, I also have a very dedicated pieces where I try to give as much of my opinion as possible, because at the end of the day, the blog is also the expression of my thinking. And so the more I go forward, the more I try to express that. But sometimes it's very hard to find a balance. Because, for instance, right now I'm focusing and digging inside a topic. I'm trying to also bring the blog forward more on the topic of decision making under uncertainty, which is the topic of the heuristics. But then at the same time, I know that if I push too much on that side, I need to have a very strong distribution, on my side, because I'm not going to get much organic traffic if I start to cover too much of this. So as this is a business, so as a business, I need to balance the two things. So where there is interest, where is my interest, and then where there is opportunity to make money. And by balancing those things out, that's how I produce usually content.
Yeah, so it seems like you have these great filters, you have constraints for yourself, and you have ways to also put your opinion in there. And now I know you have some courses as well in there for folks to dive deeper. So there's some monetization that you've built in as well. Yeah. You've added that. I think it was a couple of years into the blog, which I think is great. Like, you spent all that time building the content before introducing any kind of paid element, or at least an obvious paid element to the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's all very, we nerd out on the SEO stuff. I don't want to derail that though, but it just seems like super smart to really focus on that for SEO and kind of keep a framework around like business models. Like, hey, here's the business model for X company. And, and I'm sure people are just curious online in general. You're getting not only business owners, but just people reading the news. Like, how does Amazon make their money? As one type of avatar.
So from an SEO perspective, are you kind of keeping your finger on the pulse of like, okay, what companies are people constantly Googling? Okay, now it's time for me to write an article about this. Is that kind of the strategy?
Well, I'm doing usually try to do like three things. Like the first one, it's of course about looking at trends. So what is that? It's getting attention right now. I'm not very quick in following trends because the problem is I'm not trying to get, sometimes I know that if I do a coverage of, for instance, just a few months ago, there was a lot of buzz around WeWork. I was very late in covering WeWork just because I didn't want to attract, honestly, too much attention. I don't like the whole point of just covering something because it's in the news right now. I would rather try to anticipate that, but not because I'm just to give you an idea, I covered the DuckDuckGo business model a couple of years ago. DuckDuckGo, the search engine which is focused on privacy, right?
Yeah.
And I covered that when there was no volume at all. So if I were going to look at search volume for the DuckDuckGo business model, I wouldn't have written the piece, but I did because I thought it was so interesting that not covering it was a shame. So on one end, I wanted to I want to make sure that even though there is no search volume, but I have the gut feeling that this thing is going to explode, I'll still cover it. So that's one element. The second element is, of course, you need to look at trends because, as I said, you need to look where attention is right now and cover some of those. But it's very important not to lose your identity. So for me, as I was saying, there was a lot of buzz around WeWork a few months back. I didn't go and just cover it as soon as the financial statement was out, even though I would have done a very in-depth analysis very quickly because I didn't want to be sort of in the news. I just wanted more like to cover it when there was less noise around that. And a third element, it's really about sometimes quickly anticipating some of the trends. Like for instance, I realized a year and a half that TikTok would have exploded, and so I covered the business model at a time when at least there was not the buzz, the kind of buzz that there is today. And then I find myself getting a lot of, for instance, traffic or attention on the blog because of that. So I think there is a very important element, having your instinct, interest, and gut really into the game, because otherwise it just become an SEO game, and it doesn't have too much value in the long term. I think it's valuable because I love the whole organic traffic logic. But then if you push too much on that, I think that the whole thing is not going to help you to create any sort of a brand identity. So I'm pushing more and more in covering things that I also think will explode in the coming years. But even if they are not popular right now, because I think that's the way you also build your identity, your brand, and your business. So that's the whole point.
Yeah, so I'm curious. You just opened up a whole rabbit hole that's like making me think about this. But how are you looking ahead? Like what sort of indicators are you looking at that make you think, okay, TikTok is going to be big one day, DuckDuckGo is going to be big one day? How are you seeing that ahead of the general population? Where are you looking? Are there tools you're using? How are you coming to that conclusion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I consume a lot of information. I don't read the news, or at least I didn't read the news until I installed the Google News on my phone. Mm-hmm. But pretty much I try to consume as much information, and sometimes, at least when it comes to the marketing world, I try to follow simply where I see the attention is coming from. Just the case of DuckDuckGo, I by chance found out about DuckDuckGo, and it was born I think in 2009, so I was very late also on that. But back in 2017, because I got a bit of traffic on the blog, so I said, okay, what's this thing called DuckDuckGo? And the more I explored it, the more I found interesting. Also, the kind of model that they were experimenting with, because the main difference is that it's not yet a mature business model, DuckDuckGo, because they're still making money primarily with the affiliate revenues and stuff like that. So, but when I saw that, I got very, very, very excited, and for me there was a signal that I needed to cover it. So it's just when the excitement kicks in and I cannot control it. I mean, for me, that's the best signal that I need to cover. That doesn't matter what the search volume or the other usually metrics that we look at SEO are telling me. So usually when I cannot, the same happened with the TikTok. When I saw the company started to look into it, I was like, I felt so excited for the kind of the disruption that could have brought to the business world. I was like, okay, I need to cover that. It doesn't matter, if it doesn't have a volume right now. So I think as also entrepreneurs, if you're building a business, I think it's very important to keep the excitement as part of the game. So you need to understand, of course, when you need to stop that excitement, but when it's very strong, I think it's very important to also follow that. For instance, right now, a topic which I'm very interested about, and I think it might really explode in the coming years. It's more like on the, again, decision making for business. I may be completely wrong, but like the side of heuristics and the whole decision making under uncertainty for entrepreneurs, which really changes the game. Because we're not going to be looking anymore at heuristics as a quick and dirt ways to make decisions. Actually, there is a different school of thought, which is not new. It's something that is going on at least for the last a decade and more. Actually, probably even after the 50s and the 60s. But the most interesting part is that there is a different perspective on the way we think, which is about how we make decisions, which is different from the perspective that most people have today, especially in marketing and sales, which is about biases, fallacies, and the main way of thinking that we inherited from books like Thinking Fast and Slow from Daniel Kahneman. I mean, there is a whole new school and perspective which I'll try to bring on the table in the coming year, which is going to be part of the focus also of the blog. And if I think about the attention that is going to bring or the return on investment, I would not cover that. But I'm so excited about it, which I need to do this. I cannot stop it. So
it sounds like you're a super curious person, and it's almost like you obviously have a ton of data, but it's more of your gut instinct from the amount of data that you've analyzed. Would you say that's pretty true? That drives where your direction and where you feel like the new trends are going to be?
Yeah, I try to be disciplined, but sometimes when I get very excited, I just go for that, because I think that's the value added of what I do. The more I try to anticipate things, not forecast. I'm not a believer in forecasting on I will be wrong on a lot of things that I covered on the blog, or the things that I try not to, say this is the prediction or stuff, because I don't think, I would be right in most of the cases. But I try to look at trends. I, tell what are the most interesting things that for me are happening right now. And some of those, of course, might end up being true. And if that's the case, of course, that can be valuable for many people. So,
yeah. Now, do you see a value that, so I guess, kind of two-parter is like, I'm really curious on how you actually do the reverse engineering of all of these models. But before that, do you see the value of other people doing this themselves to like engineer, reverse engineer some model in their industry? Do you think that's, or would they have enough resources like just looking at yours and then analyzing it in a specific way to apply it to their own business?
Yeah, I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, I think there is a lot of value in understanding how you can, at least what things you need to look at when it comes to, understanding what you can borrow from an existing business and just bring it back to yours. So the more you develop a system for yourself, the better it is. So even though I put myself the resources that, I can show you the all information you need. If you do it on your end, it's good. So that's why there are many frameworks that can help you do that. For instance, there is the most used one, of course, is the business model canvas, and you can start from that framework. But I think it's very important also to develop your own way to look at those models, because, for instance, for me, from my background, I look at certain aspects, but if you're more on the marketing side or like on the engineering side, you might have a different perspective, which is also interesting. So by combining those, I think we can add more value.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Is it's where to identify what you want to model in someone else in your space or another space that you can think you can learn from. Let's get into. I'm curious on how someone else can try to do this. Identify, maybe it's not a business model, but it's a marketing strategy. Like how would they go about doing this for themselves so they can then start applying their own thoughts to it all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, there are different kinds of frameworks that you can use. As I said, usually the most used, of course, is like a framework like the business model canvas from Alexander Osterwalder. Which
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Could you repeat that one more time? I didn't catch it.
The business model canvas.
The business model canvas. Okay.
Canvas.
Yeah, it's a very simple tool with 9 building blocks, and this helps you really streamline and analyze any kind of business in 9 main building blocks. So, but I think the way I do it, it's I use my own way, and I usually each company that I look at is going to be a bit different. For instance, if I look at a company like Google, of course, my approach is going to be completely different than if I look at a very small and simple business. So if I look at a potential competitor of mine, which is, for instance, say a small website or a small business, the first thing I try to look it's really what are the most important assets that this company has, and whether I can replicate and whether it makes sense to me. So from that perspective, you can understand how that works, because of course you do a lot of SEO. And but for instance, you use probably SEO a lot, especially to produce content. But SEO is very interesting, I think, to unlock data that you can use to reverse engineer quite many companies on the web, at least to have an estimate of how they might be making money. So starting from, let's say, a small digital business, you go and you just simply look at what are, for instance, the top pages, and whether those pages are actually getting monetized, how they're getting monetized, and what model is getting followed on those pages. And again, whether it makes sense for you to replicate that, to experiment with that, or actually go in a different direction, because, for instance, you might have a different choice on how you want to build your business. On the other hand, if you look at a company like Google, the way I do it, of course, it's you start from things like the financials, because from the financials you can understand where the real money is. And what I mean, it's not about just revenue. So you look at things like the profit margins of different segments, just to understand where the real money is. For instance, if you look at the Google business model, of course, you know that there is one side of the business, the advertising business, which is about Google Ads revenues, and then there is the other side, which is about more like on the AdSense. But the problem is, when you look at the AdSense model, of course, there is the revenues are getting actually divided with the partners. So as you can imagine, the margins are way lower. Instead, if you look at things like Google Ads, the whole revenues which is coming from those platforms is 4 or 5x the actual gross expenses that they have. So they are like huge margins. So if you start understanding those logics, and then you look at the cost structure of the company. So the first thing is you look at the revenues. It's the starting point. If you have this data available, then you look at on those revenues, where is the part of the company which has a higher margins, because you will understand that this is where the company is pushing forward in terms of strategy. So, for instance, let's say that you have a software as a service business which works on recurring revenues. What you will notice most probably is that the company might have a very low one-time revenue model, where probably the company makes less money. But the reason why it makes less money, because it is pushing on the other recurring revenue streams, which is instead having a higher margin in terms of profits and in terms of growth and scalability for the company. So if you do understand that logic, you know that the way the company might be acquiring customers is by having, let's say, a lower one-time fee, and then on the other side having a subscription model, which is where the money is getting, they're building the business. And so you can try to replicate this model. And then again, if you look at other companies like Amazon, then they're going to have a totally different business. And in many cases, for very large companies, there's never a single business model within the company. There are like different business models that are getting used depending on the revenue stream, the cost structure, and the key customers of that business unit. So based on those things, you can actually understand a business. For instance, if you look at Amazon, of course, Amazon AWS has a completely different logic than the Amazon e-commerce company, Amazon platform company. So those are two different business units which run on different logics, and also they have two different kinds of key customers. So there is a different sales force, there's a different way to acquire customers. So there's all those things that you want to look at. And for me, there is never a single model or framework that you can use. It's just, I think you need to be a little bit more creative in the way you look at those things. Because, for instance, there may be a single data point that will tell you a lot more about the business than just analyzing the whole thing. So you might stumble upon that data point that tells you a lot.
Well, that makes sense. It's like there's a layered approach. You're basically trying to identify where is the attention of like that, like Google, for instance. And then if you have access to financial data, then you can, like you said, identify some of the revenues, but specifically look for the high margin revenues, because those are the most value to that company. And typically, and from there, it sounds like you have a strategy to then do some research around whatever that business model or that revenue model is, and then maybe attach
absolutely.
how the marketing looks like. Does that sound about right?
So how does the acquisition, looks like? What is if is the company more focused on using a high touch sales force? Is more focused on marketing automation? So if the first question is always the most what seems the most trivial, which is how does the company make money? But then from this simple question, there are a lot of things that you can find out. So how does the company make money? Then the next question is, where is really the profit that the company is making? And then, of course, where the other question is, where is the key customer? Because, for instance, there are companies that might have many customers, but then you realize that there are very few customers that keep the company going. And so the question is, okay, so what is this company doing to actually attract those customers? Can I actually model that? Can actually experiment that? And if so, you try to design a business model on your side, which you can test and quickly. So that's how you do it usually.
Now, if you're looking at a business that's maybe not a publicly traded company or you don't have access to financial statements around the company, like let's say we're looking at an online software as a service company, how are you coming to the conclusion of like how they're acquiring their customers and things like that? It's obviously got to be a different approach than if you actually had access to the financial statements.
Yeah, I mean, even if you start really simply by looking at SEO tools like SEMrush, Ahrefs, I mean, you can get very valuable data, because we forget that we usually, in the narrow space of SEO, we look at things and we think always, SEO is about creating content, but then most of it, I think the most interesting side is about analysis. It's about business intelligence. So you just start looking at those sites through tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs, and you start finding out, okay, those are the top pages, but are those also the pages where they're making the money, or are those just pages where they're getting a brand value, which is just getting traffic, but they're not monetizing those pages? And if that's the case, where are the pages where the money is really coming from? Probably it's not a page; it's a partnership that there is behind. So, for instance, you look at websites that don't have traffic and then they sell for like hundreds of millions of dollars. So you say, how is this possible from a digital marketing perspective? Because you think in terms of page views, but then you figure that there is a set of partnerships, or for instance, local partners that actually are the real value, a real asset of the company. So you go back, you look at those, you try to understand, how did they actually manage to actually close those partnerships, and can I model that? And again, you go back, you draw potential business model, but again, it's very quick exercise. It's not a business plan. We don't want to have business plans unless, of course, we have to ask money to investors, and they love business plans. In most cases, business model needs to be done also on a piece of paper very quickly, test it, and experiment until you figure things out.
Yeah, no, I love that you said use tools like Ahrefs and SEMrush, but looking at through the lens of doing research into the business as opposed to the lens of doing SEO, because we actually do that with our podcast guests. We actually when a guest comes on the show, we'll actually plug in their URL into Ahrefs, and we'll look at what sort of keywords they're ranking for and how popular their website is, and we actually mine quite a bit of data from Ahrefs that we could potentially talk about when we have interviews with people. So. Similar concept. Obviously, we're doing it from an interview standpoint, and you're saying, from a researching a business model standpoint, but we're kind of coming to the same conclusions.
Right. There's a lot of data on there online. What are some other tools that you would suggest using in your research phase?
Well, I usually, again, look at a lot of financial data, because usually I look at companies that are under for instance have IPO'd, so they're they're listed. But then in many other cases, there are many ways to get financial data. There are other platforms, like, of course, very very simple ones. I mean, nothing complex, like Crunchbase, like Euler. I mean, there's those sort of platforms where you can get some idea, and then the rest you can just estimate it quickly. I mean. As you know, there are several ways. For instance, if you know the value of a page, given by the value of the main keyword of the page. And you just do a very simple exercise of understanding how much people they may be converting on that page. You might have an idea of the money they're making.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much the way you do it. And in most cases, it's really about understanding that you can use very simple data points to understand the whole logic of a company or a business model. There's no need for too much data or complexity. For instance, when I look at also financial statements, you just do a very simple ratio analysis, and you look at 3, 4, 5 core metrics, and that's all you need. I mean, there's no much need just analyzing more, because then the risk is just overcomplicating things.
True.
And you match that with the other business understanding, the industry, what other companies are doing. You measure that, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing complex.
Yeah. No, it sounds like you obviously consume a lot of content. You do a lot of research. You do a lot of your own digging. And one of the topics that's come up quite a bit, not really on the podcast, but just between me and Joe and some of the people we talk about, is the topic of knowledge management, and how do we sort of store and organize all this information we're collecting. And I'm curious how you do that. So let's say you're kind of digging deep into the Amazon business model. I imagine you're reading a bunch of articles. You're doing research into the financial statements. You're maybe listening to podcasts. You're consuming and doing this research. How are you sort of organizing and keeping track of all this data that you're collecting?
Well, usually I'm not the most organized person in the world, but I usually do a very simple collection, for instance, of the URLs of like, for instance, like just take screenshots, or like I send myself emails. Nothing really complex about the way I do it. The only thing is the only North Star that I have is I try not to look at the content which is out there, because I try to of course, if there are like news of investments that those companies are making, those are very important just to take into account, to understand how things are changing, and to understand what actually acquisition, for instance, might drive the company in the coming years. But I really try to look at things and develop my own perspective. Mm-hmm. And just go with that. So I'm not trying to look at what others are saying and then just take a bit from here, then another bit from there, which is usually what happens when you produce content for when you do blogging, because you say I'm gonna get a piece from here, a piece from there, and that's how I produce a content. But for me, the most valuable piece of content that you can produce is when you try to do original research as much as possible. On things that you can really have, you have the data that you need, and you can just do give your own perspective.
Yeah. No, for being not for you not well, you're saying you're not the most organized person in the world. Your blog is.
That's on point.
it's definitely on point, and it's easy to find everything. But it makes a lot of sense too. Is that you're distilling the information in your own concepts, in your own words, and your understanding. I'm sure you're connecting things to other models you've already analyzed. So then it allows you to almost have like a framework you can work with, it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one key point, as you said. I mean, for instance, if I have to cover a business model, I try to cover different players in the same industry. So, for instance, if I go and I look at the financial statement of one company, I go and I look at the other financial statements, and then I produce several like business models, and then I can do a comparison on the whole industry. It's just a lot of work and research, which I think is the way right now blogging can be successful, because otherwise you just like many others as you do. I mean, all the stuff that you have and research and podcasts. I mean, this is all original stuff that you're putting out there, and it's all fruit of your own understanding of the business world, which it's extremely valuable. But if you don't have that approach, I don't think you can add much value today. So I think that's the way. Well,
yeah, I love that, and you're right. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. Where my question was sort of coming from is like, Me personally, I consume a lot of content and I read a lot of data, and then I have a hard time, remembering all that data. So I kind of have to store it somewhere in like an Evernote or something like that to kind of have access to it. And then there's kind of systems around how I store it. But it kind of sounds like what you're saying is you kind of do the research and kind of collect all the data and almost kind of keep it in your head, and then you write about it. Is that kind of what it is?
Yeah, the process sometimes it takes it can take days, or it can take a few hours, depending on how much I've been reading about a certain topic. Because, for instance, for some time I've been reading about a topic for months, and then I sit down and I'm able to have pretty clear ideas about it. But of course, if it is a new topic or something, then there is a lot of it takes a lot of time to just sit down, put together the different pieces of information, and just collect them. But otherwise, if I'm faster, it's just because I've been reading about it for a very long time, and I'm also I love reading. So for me, like two things that I like doing in my free time, reading and writing. So it's easy for me, but
so essentially you immerse yourself into it, so that when you kind of write, you've been so immersed in it for so long that the writing comes naturally with it.
Yeah, that's usually what happens when I cover like an in-depth topic, like for instance business models. But of course, if I go instead and look at a business model of a company, it might take me also sometimes, depending on the understanding that I have of the industry, it might take me also days or a couple of weeks, or like sometimes I start a piece a month before, and I end up writing that same piece the month after. So depending on the kind of experience that I had, the kind of how much reading I've been doing on that industry, I can cover faster or slower. For instance, right now, if I were to write about Google or like the digital marketing industry, would be way easier for me if I were going in other new industries. Like for instance, lately I've been covering also the luxury industry, and before I could really get into it, I needed to look at different models. So I looked at all the giants of luxuries. It took me like a month, so it wasn't a fast process. So it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
There was no shortcut.
Yeah, it's just a lot of consumption, and you even say this on your website, but it's all about internalizing the concepts. And something Matt and I have identified in ourselves, and this is why our podcast even exists, is we love to learn a lot of things. We're always experimenting, tinkering, and consuming content, but we also educate. We want to present that content in our own words, with our own case studies and results and all that stuff. And it's almost like a pleasure of ours to just put it out there to the world and not hold it too tight. And that internalization helps solidify these concepts for ourselves. And I feel like that's what's helped our business throughout the years too.
Yeah.
To identify the weak points, and then you learn and internalize, test, and it just kind of builds upon that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about that, because that was something that when we were actually reading your about page on 4 Week MBA, and you mentioned a few times throughout the about section that there's the distinction between learning versus internalizing. Can you real quickly sort of explain how you distinguish the two?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's an amazing question, because it's the whole point of 4 Week MBA, which if you get there for the first time, the first impression is, okay, this guy wants to teach me everything I need to know in less than a month. But really, the main point is there are certain things which I can teach you also mechanically. For instance, you have the whole guide about business models, which really is a book, because the way I look at content is really eventually to have the primary guides of the website, like those were books. So that's the way I look at content development. Of course, it doesn't happen overnight, because those pieces get updated, and as they do, they become more like resources. But learning, it's the way I see it. Is nothing scientific, but the way I see it, like learning can happen quickly, because you can read something, you can also act upon it, and you can mechanically understand, a concept, but internalizing something, it takes, I think, years. Because just to give you an idea, like for me, understanding the whole concept of heuristics, like the cover that I'm trying to cover right now, it took me like I think a couple of years just to internalize some of the key principles that are underlying this discipline. So you start by, for instance, in many cases, by learning something, by looking at the superficial aspect of that discipline. For instance, you look at the different business models, but then as you dive into it, you need to internalize a few key principles, and it takes a lot of time. It's not something that happens overnight. So you may think you understood it, but actually, again, it takes time, experience, and you need to understand some key concept. And sometimes you understand it once, and then you go back and you forget it, and then you need to really understand it again. Just to give an idea, there is a whole concept of ecological rationality. So rationality based on the context, which requires you to look at things. So when we make decisions, we make them based on the context, on the narrow context where we are, because that's where the survival is in that moment, right? So the whole thing of ecological rationality requires us to look behind the behavioral aspect that there is, on why we do things. Because, for instance, if you look at the mainstream psychology mantra right now, we look at things like, for instance, people are we say things like people are risk averse, or like they're loss averse, but it's not like people are loss averse. It's more like they have a constructive paranoia, because you know that if there is a risk of losing something, actually there is some hidden aspect of taking the risk that actually can bring you toward a big failure. So it's normal process for you to actually be very loss averse than being more prone to take again the same gain. So the classic experiment in psychology goes something like that. If you have you lose $5, you gain $5. For you, losing $5, it's perceived like twice worse than actually gaining $5. But it makes total sense, because we have this sort of constructive paranoia that requires us to act in this way, because otherwise we wouldn't survive long enough in the real world, because it takes just one wrong thing that we do to actually mess the whole thing that we've been working on for a long time. So if you look at that perspective, it took me a while to actually internalize it, because I had to forget what I had learned before about biases, fallacies, and stuff like that, and just go back to a new concept. And I could actually build upon it just when I forgot about what I learned before and then internalize the new principles. So
that makes sense. You have to take your biases away from it if you are analyzing something fresh and you want a new perspective, because that's the idea of consuming anyway. And the internalization process is a lot of that. Like, so for you to internalize, obviously writing is a big piece. What are some other key elements that we might not know about instead of writing? Like, is it consuming it? Is it looking at your notes? And yeah.
I mean, reading and writing, I think, are two most important things. And taking notes, of course, it's extremely important. But when I can really summarize something without looking at sources, so when I can summarize the key concepts that I want to talk about without looking, for instance, on the web, or without looking at any of the resources that I previously read, that is a signal that I internalized what I'm talking about. And then, of course, you go back and you look at those things and you compare. But of course, summarizing those things, it's really powerful. So writing them down, I think it's very powerful process.
Right. Yeah. Summarizing our own words. Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, we kept you a little longer than they were actually right in the dot, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is amazing. So tell us, or tell the audience, where they can, obviously we've been talking about 4weekmba.com. That's what, your main site. Do you have any other place that you'd like to talk about or, direct people to?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if they add me on LinkedIn, they're going to find me.
Okay.
I'm not very active on Facebook, so if
probably for the
if
best.
you see I'm not answering on Facebook, it means that I'm not there. I just have a sort of fake account. No, I'm just kidding, but it's
You hired someone to be you on Facebook? No,
no, it's me, but I really I don't use it much. But LinkedIn, I am very very active on LinkedIn, so.
Cool.
If people want to connect, I'm very glad to discuss any of the things that we said during the show. And
awesome.
very
cool.
open to that.
And then we also have a URL here for 4weekmba.com. And that's 4 spelled out FOUR weekmba.com/what is a business model. So if
dashes in between.
Yeah, with dashes. So what dash is dash a dash business dash model. So what if they go to that URL, what are they going to get?
Well, they're going to get the main guide of the different kinds of business models that are out there, which is getting updated more and more. This is a never-ending work. So the way I see it, so that people can get back to it because it gets updated often. And they're just going to get a very in-depth introduction to the world of business models, and it's a very quick way to learn, how business models work. And again, then it takes time to internalize those concepts.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll link that up in the show notes so everybody can find that link easily. And
definitely. And lastly, I know you consume a ton of content, and one of the common questions, we're always curious of any books or resources that you find that are just absolutely valuable to your life that you just find yourself recommending. Do you have one or two of those that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of books, I think the whole Inserto series, which is from Nassim Nicholas Taleb, which is just like the whole set of books like Fooled by Randomness, The Black Swan, Anti-Fragile, Skin in the Game, and then there's another one coming out, which is the Technical Inserto, are very powerful, readings. And then lately right now I'm reading a couple of books. One is That Will Never Work by Mark Randolph, which is the co-founder of Netflix. I think it's a very interesting read. And it tells the story of how Netflix got founded, the whole story of how it started. And then I'm reading a lot of stuff and papers about German psychologist, which is called Gerd Gigerenzer, which is the author of Risk Savvy, which is how to make good decisions. And behind that, my suggestion, at least I give it to myself, it's try to read as many, internalizing as many books as possible. So, for instance, right now what I'm going back to many books that I read a few years ago and just reading them again rather than adding new stuff to what I already went through.
That makes sense. Yeah. And we hear that pretty often with, high achievers and people who really want to internalize is go back to some of those things that really made an impact or ones you want to dive deeper in. Because, it's just like any kind of movie or show that you watch too. You're going to pick up new things, or maybe your mind wasn't ready for a concept the first time you read it. So thanks for sharing those. We'll link those all in the show notes as well, because I know those books have been mentioned, or some of them have, as crucial books to, and there's a couple in there that I have not consumed myself. Yeah. Cool, man. Well, this has been fascinating, and thank you for sharing your model, and definitely your website is going to be bookmarked in my in my pocket, in that little app. So thank you very much for your time.
Don't get into analysis paralysis, though.
No. Not too much, because you can. Yeah, it's literally like an encyclopedia. All right. Well, thank you very much, and for hanging out with us late too on your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, thank you for listening to that episode. This is Joe Fier. I'm sure you probably already knew that. And Matt is not here right now, but I'm pretty sure he enjoyed the episode just as much as you and I did, because, he went into the production of kind of making that thing right along with me. So thank you very much. And I want to give a quick shout out to our buddies over at Easy Webinar. These guys have been supporting us for a while, a long time. And Casey Zeman is just a super good guy all around. He's actually been on the show before. He's the founder of Easy Webinar. So if you look up Casey Zeman on any podcast platform you're listening to, go check him out. Go check out his backstory, what he's all about. You can learn a lot about webinars as well. And right now, Easy Webinar, these guys are actually hooking you up with a great trial. It's a completely free trial to test out their software, soup to nuts, check it all out and see if it's a good fit for you. If you go to easywebinar.com/hustle, that's HUSTLE, if you didn't know how to spell hustle, there you go. So if you go to easywebinar.com/hustle, you can go grab a free trial. And Easy Webinar literally lives up to its name. It's super simple. Super easy. And it does all the stuff that you're looking for in any kind of thing with webinars. They literally cover every single type of webinar you possibly can do. So from live to automated to scheduled at specific times and all these crazy features in between. Can't even list them all out. I'll be here way too long. They give you a ton of advanced analytics, what's working, what's not during your webinar based off all these actions. You'll see who attended, how long they stayed, if they clicked the offer or if they didn't. Basically, you're going to make more money and you're going to work less with this thing, and you're going to create better relationships with the folks that are listening because it's a good experience. You want to give that good experience along with some great content, of course, and a killer offer if that's what you got for them. So go try it out yourself. Go check out easywebinar.com/hustle. That's easywebinar.com/hustle. Alrighty. So that is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, enjoying it. Hopefully you did. I'm pretty sure you did if you lasted this long. And go check out Easy Webinar when you get the chance, and we will talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Hustle and Flowchart podcast. Before taking the time to listen, we want to give you something a little bit special. Every single episode that we do, we actually have somebody on our team take notes. We basically have a Cliff's Notes version of every episode where you can go and find all of the tips and tactics that they laid out, all of the resources that they laid out, all the good stuff from this episode. We actually have a nice simple notes version that you can find on our website. So go to evergreenprofits.com, find this episode that you just listened to, and give us your email address and we'll send you the notes. Thanks for listening.